This week in Linux, Fedora announced some plans for future releases that may be controversial. There's a new IDE available for Linux that might turn some heads, and GNOME's extension website is getting a redesign. Finally, all of this and more on This Week in Linux, the weekly news show that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world. Now let's jump right into your source for Linux good news. A quick update from a previous episode because a pain point for Ubuntu users has finally been addressed. I'm of course talking about the lack of sideloading deb packages inside of the App Center. You can now do this, and it's as simple as you'd expect. You just double-click on the deb file, and it will open in the App Center. Now, you will get a third-party warning when you do so, but I think this is good. In fact, it's understandable to add that kind of warning to the process because a deb package could be used maliciously, just like any kind of package. As long as you get the files from a trusted source, it should be okay, but it is possible to be a problem because, especially deb packages, they do not have any sort of sandboxing, and when you install them, they're given sudo access to essentially be able to do anything they want on your system. So I think it is reasonable to include a warning here. Now, there is a little bit of a bummer here because you can't uninstall an app from the App Center that you installed with the deb. You'll need to use gdebi or apt in order to remove that deb that you sideloaded. Also, if there is an update for the downloaded deb, I have to manually be downloaded again and installed, or use gdebi or apt still. So while this is an improvement to let users sideload debs into the system, it is kind of disappointing that there are still issues waiting to be addressed, like the lack of uninstalling or updates. So you got to start somewhere, at least. Having the ability to install is a good thing, but we got to get those updates and uninstalls solved too. This week in Linux, we've seen some interesting discussions happening inside of the Fedora project related to two potential changes for upcoming releases. The two things we are going to be talking about today is the possibility of opt-in metrics being added, and the other is Fedora Workstation switching to Wayland only. Now, they already had Wayland by default for a very long time, so this is a big difference from that. Wayland only is a big change. But let's first start with the opt-in metrics. Now, this is going to be related to Fedora Workstation 42. And for those who are not familiar, this kind of thing would be like anonymous user information from system settings to hardware information and desktop usage patterns to be sent to the Fedora project as you use it. Although, again, like I said, this is opt-in. Now, for those who don't know what opt-in versus opt-out means, opt-in is data collection off by default, so the user has to actively turn it on. And opt-out is that the data collection is on by default, so the user has to actively opt out. Now, what would be collected? Well, they say that it's going to help developers focus their efforts by collecting system hardware information, various system settings, desktop usage patterns like what apps are used and how often system settings are accessed and that sort of thing, as well as performance details like disk and memory usage, and really any evidence of problems like system crash logs and that sort of thing. Now, Fedora has a discussion that covers all of the details related to this, and they also talk about things like steps to ensure no personal data is being collected and what they're doing to do that, how metrics will be used, who has access to the data, and much, much more. I think collecting metrics is not an issue inherently. There will always be people who hate the idea of any data being collected, but trying to appease those people isn't possible without accepting a no for everyone. I think there are ethical ways to do data collection, and giving the user a choice to participate or not, and assuming no upfront is a fantastic way to do that. I think that opt-out can be fine as well if data being collected is anonymized, so it's not able to be used for digital fingerprinting or any of that kind of thing, but opt-in is, of course, even better. Now, collecting data to know how many people have certain hardware or certain features being used and all of that is a great way to make decisions for improvements. So overall, I don't have a problem with the data collection if it's done properly. Now, it does seem like they're going to be doing it properly, so I'm okay with that. And I also very much appreciate how Fedora has a discussion thread that you can ask questions for the topic and how they already answered all the most important questions, like how will people be prompted to participate. Now, this is great because to see the proactive engagement with the community and also preemptively doing it is fantastic. And the way that they're doing it, I think, is good in the sense that it's going through initial setup. So they say that the initial setup is when you're going to be asked to do the participation or not. And I think it's a good place to ask. It might not be the best place because they don't really specify if this is for install or the first like OEM setup thing. I hope this is during install and not after install with that OEM setup thing that GNOME has, because people might just close that window without ever actually going through the process of choosing whether or not to participate. And being part of the install guarantees that the question has to be answered, but that's a logistical thing. That's my preference. So I think if they're considering whether to do it install or OEM stuff, maybe this will help sway them to do the install because it's more likely that people will choose it then. Because sometimes people just see that pop up and close it and never even go through it. That's just, at least I've done that before. Now let's talk about the Wayland only change. This change will only affect GNOME Workstation for new installs of Fedora 41. And systems upgrading from older releases of Fedora Workstation will not be impacted by this change. Now, also, if they need to have X11, the X11 packages will still be in the repo to manually install them. Now, you might be wondering, why are they doing this change? Well, GNOME 47 can be compiled without X11 support, and Fedora is prepping for the day when X11 is completely deprecated. Now, I expected this, because when Fedora KDE announced that it was going to only do Wayland only, I said it was only a matter of time before Fedora Workstation did it as well, and I have not seen much backlash about Fedora KDE doing it. GNOME 47 will also have explicit sync support with NVIDIA users, which should mean that the experience will be a very solid thing for those users and that only having Wayland could work. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that particular thing, but the fact that they're doing it at this point where NVIDIA users could have the potential of being a good experience for them, I think that there is a better argument to do it now than before. So we'll have to see what happens. What are your thoughts? What do you think about the opt-in metrics discussion and possibly switching to Wayland only for GNOME users? Let me know in the comments. Mozilla is back in the news this week with a new version of the Firefox web browser and also a new version of the Thunderbird email client. Now, the highlights for Firefox is that translated selected text and hyperlinks text can be done with the right-click context menu. It shows recent searches or trending searches in the address bar now, like Google trending and that sort of thing, although that is for US and Canada only for some reason. Also, another feature is that streaming in private browsing tabs has gotten better with protected content now being supported for sites like Netflix and that sort of thing. Also, there is an experimental alternative to user tracking for ad attribution called privacy preserving attribution. And well, they say, and I quote, attribution is very important to advertisers. Sadly, tracking is the only way to perform attribution without help from the browser. Tracking is terrible for privacy because it gives companies detailed information about what you do online, while Firefox includes many privacy protections that make it more difficult for sites to track you online, like the enhanced tracking protection, total cookie protection, query parameter stripping, and many other measures. There's a huge incentive for sites to find ways around these in order to perform attribution. Now, they also go on to say that the PPA, or the privacy preserving attribution, does not involve websites tracking you. Instead, your browser is in control. This means strong privacy safeguards, including the option to not participate. Also, they say that PPA does not involve sending information about your browser activities to anyone at all. This includes Mozilla and, of course, their partner for the attribution stuff. Now, also, advertisers only receive aggregate information that answers basic questions about the effectiveness of their advertising, end quote. Now, as someone who does deal with advertising in some ways or another, I think that there's a very good place for advertising. It's a necessity. It might not be a thing that everybody likes, but it is a necessity. And I do appreciate the fact that Mozilla is putting in effort to allow advertising to be done, but also done properly, which I appreciate that. So also, I really like the translate selected text feature, because having to waste time by copying and pasting text into a website that you had to load for that translation is just, such a 2010 way of doing things. That's so lame. So this is really good that they're doing it. And also, I have tested it. It works quite well, so I appreciate that. Also, now let's talk about Thunderbird, because Thunderbird 128 has been released, and it is an ESR version, or extended support release version. Now, this means that distros that need the ESR versions of applications in order to release them can finally make an update. Now, you would imagine that would be Debian, but Debian has actually been updating Thunderbird for quite a bit and has a version 1.15. And the reason I make that as a joke is because it seems like the last ESR from Thunderbird was maybe 12 years ago. Like, it's hard to find the version information about when was an ESR and when it wasn't, because it's not clear on their version history. I went through the website, I went through Wikipedia, all sorts of stuff, couldn't find it. So I don't know, but the last one I could find that guaranteed the specific ESR was like 12 years ago. So it could have been newer than that, but who knows? If you know, let me know in the comments. I would like to know when the last one was. So moving on. There are currently 2 editions of Thunderbird. There's, of course, the regular Thunderbird and the Thunderbird ESR. Both of these will be maintained and based on the same Gecko engine. This latest version of Thunderbird has a new messages count added to the threaded messages. They've also added a Get Messages button to the unified toolbar. This allows you to pull in new messages for individual accounts rather than all accounts at once. They've also added some improvements to the OpenPGP. For those who are not familiar, OpenPGP is like a widely used email encryption standard. And one of the changes is the key manager can create revocation or revoke statements for secret keys. And they've also fixed hardware key multi-factor authentication support for Flatpaks. Also, another highlight is that there's the newest messages will now be placed at the top of the list by default, which is fantastic. Every other email client. So I know some people like to have it at the bottom. I don't know why. I get that it does exist, that people want that. I never understood it. So I'm happy to see that Thunderbird now has it listed by the top, because every single time I installed Thunderbird, I had to change it. And I'm very curious how many people don't like it that way. Very curious. Also, there's a lot of new changes and fixed items for 128. There's some UI theming fixes. They've made cards, indicators easier to read. They've also done a lot of other things related to just bug fixes and UI improvements. Now, there's not really an upgrade available for people who are using Thunderbird 1.115, but that will be added in a future release. So if you are currently using 115, you can either install fresh and move all your stuff to the new version of 128, or you can wait for that update feature to be released. Now, I'm happy to see that all the improvements that Thunderbird is making, because it is one of the best open source email clients and is, of course, the OG email desktop app. But I got to say, I'm still waiting for real threaded conversations that include your own emails. Gmail introduced this feature in 2005, and at this point, I can only use a client that has this feature. Many other things are nice to haves, but that is a necessity for me, and hopefully one day that happens in Thunderbird. So if you are a Thunderbird user and like to check out the latest version, of course, you'll find links in the show notes. Do you remember the Atom text editor? You know, the one that was made by GitHub to compete with Sublime Text and was later acquired and then destroyed by Microsoft when they bought GitHub because of VS Code and all that? Well, I have some good news for some of you missing the days of Atom. No, it's not back, but something else has taken its place, and it might be even better, and it's being made by the original developers of Atom. The Zed editor has made its way to Linux this week, and I'll admit I have my eye on it, and I'm not sure if it can pull me away from my precious Sublime Text, but it might. So the highlights of this particular application is that Zed is an IDE that is a GPU accelerated editor. So it can give you the power of the CPU and GPU, and it's also written in Rust. So better performance and that's fantastic. They did show a metric of like what it compares to the different editors, and they do claim it is faster than Sublime Text. So I am pretty interested in that. Also, they have a lot of cool features like expansive language support, of course, syntax highlighting, auto indent, auto complete, integrated terminal stuff, themes, and of course, the obvious Vim mode. You got to have Vim mode, don't you? Also, they do have use of AI to help generate code. So you can use ChatGPT with GTP4 or GitHub's Copilot to do this. Now, there is one thing that is kind of weird. The way you install this application is odd. It's just a curl script that then does a curl command that then gets a shell script and then pipes it through SH. And I don't like that. There are third-party packages you can get that are from various different distros. Like you can get Arch distribution stuff, the Homebrew stuff, Fedora packages, and Solus packages and stuff like that. So if you are using one of these distributions, you can get packages for it. But the default is to use the curl script. And that's not good. It's not necessarily bad. It's not bad that they're doing it overall. It's just not good because we shouldn't use this way as a method to deliver genuine packages, because it's also a method to deliver malware. Because if people don't know that is a thing that they could do with it, they might just, I've done it for this particular application. Maybe it'll be okay for this one. And they just copy and paste it and boom, bad stuff happens. So if that's for anybody who is part of Zed, I would like to request that you create some packages, even if it's a flat pack or an app image or a snap or whatever. Just make some packages, because that's not the best way to distribute software in Linux, or at least it's not the most responsible way. I guess maybe I shouldn't call it responsible. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. All of this sounds great to me, so I will definitely be on putting it on my list to try out. Nothing has been able to pull me away from Sublime Text for many years, so maybe this one could be the one. Who knows? I guess we'll see. What about you? Are you using Sublime Text, or what editor are you using? Is Zed something that you are interested in checking out? Let me know in the comments. GNOME extensions, the add-ons that improve the overall experience of the GNOME desktop. These extensions provide enhancements like having a system tray, desktop icons, and other features so many people expect to be there by default, but for some reason are not. OMG Ubuntu has discovered that the GNOME project is redesigning the GNOME extensions website. This is a much needed update because it's had pretty much the same interface for about 12 years now. Sure, they changed the header at the top during that time, but that's about it. So what are the changes that you can expect in the new version? Well, the homepage will have sections for new, updated, and popular extensions, an easy-to-find search bar in the header, as well as a sort and filter option for the search results. And the extension listing page will have a larger screenshot, a clear rating system, and easy-to-read info sections, which is fantastic to see. Now, there is no ETA for when this will be done or when the changes will go live, but this is really good to see that they are doing it, because the GNOME extensions website does need a little bit of care and love added to it. Extensions are an interesting paradox in GNOME, though. They are very useful, very, very useful. And most argue that they might even be a requirement to have a good experience in GNOME. But at the same time, they seem to be unimportant to the GNOME project, because they tell people to use extensions to get certain sought-after features, like the system tray icons and desktop icons and that sort of thing, but then don't offer access to those extensions out of the box. You have to jump through a few hoops to find how to use the extensions, or such as having to install an extensions manager application to use it. And last I checked, they still continue to break after every single release of the GNOME desktop. So GNOME extensions have always felt like kind of an afterthought for the GNOME project for all of these reasons and more. So I hope this is a sign that they are changing their perspective on extensions and making them more accessible. For example, giving users the ability to discover and install them without having to jump through a bunch of hoops first. That would be very nice. So I hope this new revamped website is the first sign that they're going to be putting a lot more emphasis on the extensions, at least making it easier for people who don't need to have a special application, or at least if you do want to have a special application to get the extensions, that's okay. Just provide that by default rather than making it so that people have to figure out that extensions are a thing in the first place, and then figuring out how to install it themselves and having to Google it and all that sort of stuff. Just make it a little bit easier is what I'm saying. What do you think? You think I'm being a little too hard on GNOME about the extensions website or the extension system in general? Let me know in the comments below. There's a new version of DXVK, and for those unfamiliar, DXVK is the Vulkan-based implementation of Direct3D for Linux with Wine/Proton. It's pretty important, as you can imagine. Now let's talk about what is new with DXVK 2.4. DXVK 2.4 expands compatibility for older games by adding Direct3D 8 support thanks to D8VK. Also, native WSI has seen some changes for this is the Windows System Integration. So the WSI backends are now implementations of a common interface, which effectively implements the same API that was exposed to the rest of DXVK. WSI init will iterate through each compiled in backend and continue until one of them successfully initializes. Also, DXVK 2.4 introduces non-native refresh rate emulation. What this means is that in environments where the display mode cannot be changed, like Proton, for example, it is possible that DXVK reports a different refresh rate to the game than what the display is currently running at. This is problematic for games that require to be run at 60 FPS but do not limit their frame rate when using a 60 Hz display mode. To work around this, the frame rate limiter will now be engaged automatically if a game runs in full screen mode with vertical synchronization enabled. And if the detected frame rate over a short period of time is higher than the refresh rate of the selected display mode, this will mean that DXVK can optimize for this. This also applies for D3D12 when using VK D3D-Proton. Also, with this latest version of DXVK, AMD GPU users should have a better experience on the official drivers. And also, 16 games got some workarounds or fixes. That includes Battlefield, Dead Space 2, Fallout 4, and many, many more. You can learn more about the latest versions with the links that you'll find in the show notes. This week in Linux, GamingOnLinux.com celebrated their 15th anniversary of the website. So congrats to Liam and everyone else involved in making this website what it is. I have used GamingOnLinux.com as a way to get gaming news for this show for about 8 years now. So 8 years of those 15. So not only congrats, but also a big thank you to y'all for making it possible to allow me to retain some of my sanity. For those that are curious, making a weekly video podcast show about the latest news when it isn't your full-time job is a lot. So thanks again to Liam and GamingOnLinux.com crew. I have been able to retain a sliver of sanity throughout that time. So GamingOnLinux.com kicked off on July 5th, 2009. So this is the 15th anniversary. And they post a blog post every year about the anniversary. And usually they talk about what is needing to be done and that sort of stuff. But this year, there was not that much to talk about for the article, which is really good. And also they talk about that in the article. They say that why are they not talking about stuff? Well, things are great. Looking back over the years of website birthdays at things that he's talked about, what we've been through Steam machines, Proton, Steam Deck, and so much more. And he says that right now, it's the best Linux gaming has ever been. It's easier than ever. And what a fantastic place to be in. I completely agree. So, Liam, again, thanks so much for creating this website. And for those who are not familiar with it, if you're interested in Linux gaming and want to get the latest news for everything, because I can't cover everything on this show. I talk about some things that are Linux gaming related, and sometimes there's just so much that I can't possibly do it. But you can check out GamingOnLinux.com. And again, congratulations for reaching such a milestone of 15 years. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on this show and want to be kept up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world, then be sure to subscribe. And of course, remember to like that smash button. If you'd like to support the show and the Tux Digital Network, then consider becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership, where you can get a bunch of cool perks like access to the patron-only sections of our Discord server and much, much more. You can also support the show by ordering the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt or the This Week in Linux shirt at tuxdigital.com/store. Plus, while you're there, check out all the other cool stuff we have like hats, mugs, hoodies, and so much more at tuxdigital.com/store. I'll see you next time for another episode of your source for Linux news. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell. I hope you're doing swell. Be sure to ring that notification bell. And until next time, I bid you farewell.